Hi there, welcome to the 1760 sessions, conversations with leaders building products, teams, and systems that actually move the needle. I'm Matt Reyes, principal at 1760 Strategic AI, and today I'm with Evan McFalls, co-founder and CEO of EM-KOS, an agency that layers real-world strategy with AI to replace outdated marketing playbooks. Evan, it's great to have you on the show. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, Matt. I'm excited to jump in.
So, how did you go from leading marketing at places like the Neuro Leadership Institute to co-founding EM-KOS?
Well, long story. I actually spent a lot of years in academia. So I was an academic researcher and a student, of course, for many years. I then went through my doctoral studies, and in parallel, I was working at a marketing agency for throughout that time.
Yeah.
Really focused primarily on content strategy and thinking about how we realize narrative across a variety of different channels. As I made my way through my academic and professional careers, one of the things that I've always asked myself is how does narrative actually make an impact on the way that we organize and live in the world? How do the things that we do in our working lives and our intellectual lives actually shape the way that our lived experiences come together? And so that eventually led me to working at the Neuro Leadership Institute because I always had this hunger as an academic to move things out of theory and into a more practical realm. The cognitive science component of the Neuro Leadership Institute very much appealed to me at that time because it allowed me to really think about how you pair theory with real tangible life science to change behavior. Essentially, narrative is very much how we understand behavior and influence behavior. Ultimately, and obviously I'm not a professional psychologist, so I may be mixing up my terminology a little bit here, but essentially marketing in many ways is a form of behaviorism. It's a form of
Right.
influence, and that's something that I'm just deeply fascinated by. I'm fascinated by how we connect through stories and how we change the world through stories. Basically, every institution that we navigate in this world is narrative given tangible form. And, something that I always thought about when I was much younger was, well, if you can write the narrative, if you can understand the narrative, then you can change the material reality of the world that you occupy. And so that was a lot of what my career has been about.
Hmm.
Um, However, I've always had this tremendous hunger to own a larger share of the pie. And I don't think about this as, empire building in terms of,
Right.
oh, I want more power or things like that. But
Right. Right.
I found that the there are some long-standing and tiresome debates that have plagued business since time immemorial. Of course, one of those debates is, oh, which is better, marketing, sales, which is more valuable to the company? They're both
Yeah.
critically valuable.
Yeah.
And of course, then in the marketing world, this debate drives me up a wall, frankly, the question about brand versus performance marketing.
Right.
You really need all of them, and I've always instructed the people that I've mentored and that I train and that I hire to really think about basically every component of your go-to-market mechanism as a portfolio that you're managing. And so you do need brands, you do need performance, you do need an effective sales team with appropriate sales enablement. You do need excellent marketing. Marketing is how you begin to realize your brand process, and really marketing is embedded throughout the entirety of
Hmm.
the organization, ideally. And I found that organizations fail when they do not think about themselves as an integrated ecosystem. And so when I was thinking about what I wanted to do after I left the Neuro Leadership Institute, I did take, I took a bit of a sabbatical, which is much needed because I was one of those people that never took a vacation in my entire life. And so I decided to take a big, big, big vacation.
Yeah.
Um, and then I thought, all right, this is my chance to breathe life into my long-standing business philosophy that you must create an integrated ecosystem to be truly effective in business and to be truly effective in strategy.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And so that's I guess, the origin and basis for EM-KOS.
Exactly.
And what's the core mission? I know you kind of touched on it, but what's the core mission you're solving today that felt hard to achieve elsewhere? What makes EMCO stand out that's, that hasn't been done before?
I think that what makes EM-KOS stand out is that I think many marketing agencies, and we actually don't describe ourselves as a marketing agency, we're a business consultancy. Of course,
Yeah,
go-to-market is incorporated in that, but we're thinking
right,
about marketing, sales, customer success,
right.
internal
Everything.
operations, which I'm a big operations nerd. I think what EM-KOS does differently is that we are actually thinking through the entirety of a company's operating model and thinking through ways to optimize it. The other thing that I think that makes us very different is that we think deeply about what strategy is and what it is not. I
Yep.
don't know how many leadership retreats you've attended in your lifetime, but
Yep.
perhaps some of the listeners will be familiar with the experience where you're in a long, long, exciting leadership retreat where people are thinking about all the things that they'd like to accomplish. And ideally, when you're thinking about, your 5-year strategy, your 1-year strategy, etc., it is actually a strategy. But what I found all too often is that strategy isn't actually being created. People are not thinking about
Right.
the realities that may be impacting the business. They're not thinking about how strategy cascades down into goals, cascades down into objectives, key results, cascades down into roles and responsibilities and daily tasks for employees. And every time I left a leadership retreat where that didn't happen, I thought, well, you didn't form a strategy, you just created a wish list, and I wish you all the best.
Yeah, that's amazing. What does an engagement look like for MCOS? I guess you can even be just very high level. So how does that how do you, I guess, engage with an organization? What level do you come in at? How does, how does an output look like, a deliverable look like for, a potential client?
At risk of sounding a little silly here, we do it all, and we come at all sort of different levels. But to kind of give a general idea, we're typically partnering with senior leadership at companies, and then embedding ourselves within their teams to execute a number of the strategic tasks. So generally there will be a multi-phase approach where typically we're working with senior leadership to think through their operating systems, to think through their
Yeah.
technology stack, to think through their market research, supposing that they have done any market research. And
Yeah.
then we'll certainly work on that with them. And then, as we arrive at a fully formed strategic vision, then we'll move into different phases of execution. So that could look like training marketing and sales teams to implement new systems and to think about, interpretive models for example, revenue attribution, or whatever the case may be. It could look like really thinking about, okay, well, what are your 4 Ps? And I know that for some people the 4 Ps in marketing is old hat, but I always think that you should
Yeah.
find ways to apply tried and true, perhaps older tools in new ways. And I found that sometimes companies lose track of some of those foundational principles, and then they wonder why things aren't working because they're so busy throwing spaghetti at the wall and trying to
Yeah.
figure out what might stick that they miss out on the fact that, well, some problems are easily solved when you're not continually trying to reinvent the wheel without good
Right.
reason. So
Amazing. Amazing. And how I guess this is a good segue into how in your process and in this workflow, how has MCOS been leveraging AI? So what are the main, I guess, your main use cases for it within, each step of the way? What do you love about it? How has it really, helped you guys scale and help you deliver a better product or a better outcome for customers?
we use AI in a number of different ways. For example, when we're thinking through people's technology stacks, we'll help them to identify AI tools or AI sub tools, perhaps within their technology stack that they haven't quite mastered. So, for example, HubSpot is rolling out a number of AI tools on a regular basis that I find that all too often a lot of companies that perhaps have implemented HubSpot don't really have a dedicated person who's really helping them to understand how to
Right.
leverage those tools. And so one of the things that we focus on is artificial intelligence education. In our daily processes, for example, we use Notion AI to help us
Right.
manage, manage our notes, manage a lot of our book, and it helps to manage our bookkeeping. We use AI with Zapier for a number of automations
Hmm.
and building effective integrations, and really just thinking about how do we cut down on rote tasks that could be done by human beings, but much slower than AI can.
Right.
We also use it pretty often in processing large data sets, and I do want to add a note of caution here, a note of thinking for myself, is when we're doing research or whenever we're processing large data sets or whatever it may be, there is still a significant need to apply human intelligence to these things. So I've
Yeah.
I've heard of
100%.
cases, for example, one that was particularly shocking to me was in the legal industry where there were some, I think they were junior associates at a law firm that were using generative AI to file briefs, and it turns out they were citing law that was hallucinated. So
Right.
that's very, very important to apply human intelligence
Yeah.
to artificial intelligence. And so, yeah, we use it for things like that. And really, because the speed of innovation is so high in
Hmm.
AI at this time, we're discovering different ways to use it each day. Um, Largely, though, our focus is on increasing speed, accuracy, and efficacy, but not necessarily replacing our thinking human brains.
100%, 100%. I think, with 1760 strategic, I do something very similar, helping, customers solve strategic issues through AI, but not to replace, to your point, to replace, human thinking, but to enhance and to, because ultimately, I believe AI really is dependent on the context that it's operating off of. You know, but generative AI, for example, large language model, it's really going to make decisions based on the context that it feeds. I think it's really important to understand that aspect when anyone's using any type of artificial intelligence solution. Yeah, no, I think it's really really fascinating. How important, I guess, would you say is artificial intelligence into M-KOS's workflow, and I guess the delivery of your services.
It's critical, and that's because if you're not quick, you're dead at this point. And so
Yeah.
I'd rather be quick than dead.
Yeah.
But as these innovations continue to emerge, it is important for us to be on the cutting edge because it wouldn't be fair for us to be acting as strategic advisors to companies if we didn't know what was going on and how to apply the latest tools most effectively. In fact, we're even working on this series right now called AI or Oh No, where
Yeah.
we think about how are companies implementing AI and is it an excellent use of AI or is it a terrible use of AI? Seen some pretty interesting cases, for example, companies that are thinking, well, I think we can reduce our marketing headcount significantly, our creative headcount significantly, because we can use AI. And then they find, oh, wait, we actually don't know how to prompt effectively for this.
Right.
We actually have no idea what we're doing, but
Yeah.
unfortunately, we've eliminated these positions, and now things are not moving quickly
Yeah.
or at all.
Yeah.
And so then it's like, well, in that scenario, you are quick and dead.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so you don't want that either. Um, yeah, so I think that's my train of thought.
No, I think to that point, and I think this is, really important for anyone listening, is the big, I guess, one of the mainstream big fears with AI, and you see the, headlines, whether that's in Forbes or Wall Street Journal or something, is AI is going to replace X% of jobs by 2030 or, something like that. And so people have that underlying fear that, machines and robots are here to take our jobs, which I think there's a big misunderstanding with that. It may replace, the mundane tasks that we all hate to do, and which, machine learning and systems can do much more efficiently and much more effectively, because it's eliminating, the human error aspect. But at the end of the day, you still need human, intelligence and human thinking and human touch, so these systems can operate correctly and operate in the right context. Because they aren't completely autonomous in that way. And it's a great point in terms of, oh, now just because we have X, Y, and Z solutions that can automatically create content based on, prior content that we've done, we can now fire our 5 content creators. And it's not as simple as just doing that, because the AI and the systems evolve with it, and you need someone that has the oversight and the ability and the human knowledge to make sure that, the big part, it's not hallucinating, it's not creating, it's not going and evolving in a direction that you don't want it to go in. So I think that is incredibly fascinating.
Yeah, and I do think that it's important for people to realize that, particularly at this stage, generative AI in particular, while it can, create lots of really, really useful documents, for example, it is largely relying on previously existing information. And
Yeah.
so I think it is important for us to understand that the human element actually allows us to gain access to novelty and different ways of understanding the world. And I think that that human element is critical to using AI effectively. This
Uh-huh.
actually also bring me to it actually brings me to another, scary case that I find when I'm thinking about this concept of AI, or oh no, is I don't know anybody who's thrilled with having to use the AI customer service systems that so
Yeah.
many companies have deployed. I find myself all the time just saying, please get me in touch with a human agent.
Right.
And
Right.
I end up in your logic loop one more time. I don't know what to
Right.
do with myself.
Yeah.
And that is something that I hope that companies really think about, because customer experience is critical to your company's
Cool.
well-being and its reputation, and to customer loyalty. And if you're removing that human touch and leaving people in logic loops, or just
Yeah.
really removing that sense of connection to your brand, I think you're leaving a lot of opportunity on the table. And I think it's also much harder to learn from your customers and to innovate effectively.
100%. I could not agree more. What client challenges persist even after you add that layer of strategy and AI?
Shiny object syndrome, I find that that's one of the things that we're often trying to correct for, and we do try to
Yeah.
head off at the pass. But I do find that, particularly when we're working with founders who I love, and I don't want them to think that I'm beating them up, but they tend to, get a new idea and want to change course, and that is a very, very, very difficult thing to work with when you are, for example, in a marketing team and you have set your
Yeah.
strategy. I think that in building your annual budget and your annual execution targets,
Right.
should probably be planning for some spontaneity in there. But when every day is spontaneous and urgent, nothing is spontaneous and urgent, because what you
Right.
expect is that there's going to be chaos. That chaos will always come out in the wash eventually. And hey, maybe you'll get lucky and that big idea that you have every other day, one of them is going to take off. But in all likelihood, what I've found is that people do a lot of context switching when they're maybe too involved in the day-to-day execution of work, or too inclined to interrupt the flow of plan. Which
Right.
is to say that you should not pivot, but if you're constantly pivoting, then you're probably making
Right.
back moves rather than forward momentum. And
Right.
so that is a persistent challenge, but it is one of those things that, we, in the formation of EM-KOS, we thought deeply about how do we address this, and how do we continually keep people on message and keep their eye on the ball. That's being said, while we do work on a retainer basis for execution of a number of companies, of course, there's the case where you put together, a great strategy and you help people do all of these things, and then months later they say, "Oh, the strategy is not working," and then you end up doing a little bit of an audit of what actually happened over the past couple of months, and it turns
And
out,
they
well,
didn't follow it.
exactly, the strategy is not
Yeah,
you're not doing that. You've been chasing the shiny object, and so
yeah,
strategy can't work if you're not executing it.
exactly, exactly. What does it look like, I guess, from the optimal aspect, from your point of view, from MCOS's point of view, when AI is deeply integrated, not just as a tool and a solution, but as a strategic layer? What
I
is
think
that perfect,
I think
perfect view?
for at least in my perspective, and my co-founder may have a different perspective. In fact, that's why we work together, is because we diverge, and there's something new that emerges from the divergence of it in our thinking. But for me, it's similar to everything else. I think I said earlier that it's important for people to think about their business as an integrated ecosystem. Artificial intelligence can play a role in helping to integrate that ecosystem and help, for example, things like internal communication and data sharing and knowledge sharing, which I
Yeah,
find companies really, really struggle with. Um,
yeah,
you know, it AI should be the great silo breaker at any organization.
right.
In addition to, making people move faster and more
The
effective.
connective tissue. Yeah,
Yes, exactly. It should be. Um, I was going to say I'm going to date myself, but the show is actually well beyond, well before my time. But it's like the Bionic Man, where it's like,
yeah.
okay, we all have connective tissue, but then you integrate artificial intelligence, and hopefully you're, to quote Daft Punk, harder, better, faster, stronger.
That's that's amazing. Yeah, I think one of the most exciting parts of AI for me, at least from an organizational standpoint, is the workflow automation. So yeah, I remember you mentioned Zapier, Zapier and N8, and I think being able to get your tech stack to communicate and work, in harmoniously, and I think that's one of the coolest applications of AI today, especially from an organizational standpoint, and being able to create organizational and operational efficiency. So, you know, you don't have to waste so much time manually getting to uh, programs to talk to each other. It's just there's a flow, and you oversee it, and being able to action off of that. And I think that being able to create that time and availability for employees in an organization to think more strategically and actually use their human intelligence to innovate, or to think through problems, and hopefully not overthink, but think through problems and not as much doing the mundane manual tasks. I think that's where the excitement lies, and why we should be excited about AI in the workplace and not fearful that it's going to replace us all.
I fully agree, and I think that that's going to take leaders and teams thinking about how do we change jobs rather than replace them, and you should be changing
Yes, upskilling, right?
exactly change the
Upskilling,
nature of work to maximize people's efficacy rather than thinking about, okay,
replacing.
how can I replace people, or how can I cut corners? This is not. I think the big miss right now would be to think that artificial intelligence is a way to cut out human intelligence and cut corners.
100%.
The big
100%.
win right now is how do we get more out of the excellent minds that we have in the building?
Exactly. Exactly. And I think artificial intelligence has the potential to free up that intellectual bandwidth to be able to operate at that level.
Mhm.
And so
Yes,
I think that's the yeah.
yeah, and I think that, that's going to take a major shift in thinking, and part of that shift is understanding human beings as an investment rather than a cost center in the workplace.
100%. 100%. Yeah, and I think you made a great point about, and I'm excited that you guys are doing this, is AI education, because I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done at a corporate organizational level, past just how how to prompt, or those things. Really, just understanding how this is meant to enhance your productivity, enhance your performance, and not replace your productivity and replace your performance. I think that's like a very key um, part that that needs to be hammered in.
Absolutely.
Where does friction remain for you and for MCOS, be it delivery bandwidth, repeatable frameworks, or something else?
Yeah, I think part of it is bandwidth, which of course artificial intelligence can help with. But the part of bandwidth that it will always be difficult to fully address is that human element, which is why it
Yeah.
is so important to use the tools that we have to create more space for strategic thinking and human connection. We find that some of the best insights emerge in actually interacting with our clients, and that takes time. And so for that reason, we do think that it is important to create those repeatable frameworks and to build those workflow automations and things like that, so that when we are spending time with our clients, we are really, really maximizing the usage of that time and then going back into our systems and translating those conversations, which are so important, into quick insights. And that goes back to
Yeah.
how quick you're dead.
Yeah. Yeah. What parts of your offering right now feel are scalable and optimized, and what parts still demand, a lot of hands-on attention?
I think that technology integration and digital transformation are actually becoming increasingly easier thanks so
Yeah.
much to tools like Zapier and
Yeah.
so many things like that. And, the technology has improved so much that the actual delivery of digital transformation initiatives has gotten much, much easier and much faster. What takes a long time, or can take a long time, even with the most effective conversation, or excuse me, even with the most effective engagements, is really taking that consultative approach and getting everybody who is relevant at the company, which should be basically everybody, but of course there should be
Yeah. Right.
layering, etc., spans and layers. Um, but getting everybody on the same page about, first, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Second, what are we doing? Third, how are we doing it? And fourth, on what timeline? I find that leadership teams in particular can sometimes accidentally work at cross purposes because there's not a shared understanding, or perhaps the strategic premise is not so solid as a company believes, and the goaling is in so many different directions across the organization. And so it takes a while to kind of do that stakeholder management and say, everybody,
Yeah.
let's get on task, let's come to the same table and really think about, okay, this is the strategic premise, right? In the center. Now, how does each area of your organization, whatever size it may be, work not at cross purposes, but at integrative purpose towards that strategic premise?
Yeah. How are you guys acquiring clients now today? Is that, through word of mouth? Is that through, traditional ways? Is that through outreach? Are you leveraging AI to help with that aspect?
Quite a bit of word of mouth. Fortunately for us, we do have a nice network, and I am so grateful to many people who have helped us as we've built our business. But we actually do quite a bit of we do outreach. We do still handwrite, well, handwrite. We do use our human
Tight.
intelligence to build
Yeah.
our to build our outreach campaigns, because we do think that that human touch is very important. But we use a number of tools to help us with our prospecting and some of the top level research.
Right.
For that top
Right.
level research, we then again apply our human intelligence to go a little bit
Right.
deeper. I don't know how many times I received a LinkedIn message that is just completely irrelevant, and I can
Awful.
they just see it's from
Yeah.
AI. AI got it all wrong. Um, and I never try to be too tough on people about that, but I will sometimes, give them the courtesy of letting them know,
Yeah.
hey, this information might be a little out of date.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's, yeah, using tools like Apollo, I think it really does require, a combination of human intelligence and the information that you're getting to understand is this a good lead, is this a good prospect, how do I craft my message, how do I position my value potentially, how do I that's my so I think it's really a really good that's a really good use case and example of how to combine the latest in AI innovation while also maintaining your value and your human intelligence.
Yes, yes, I agree. And I also do like to, although this is kind of just me being a nerd sometimes, but I do actually, when, building out, content or really thinking through strategic messaging or, or even considering the strategic landscape or whatever market research we may be doing, I always like to prompt very specifically to find the holes or the things that I did not the things I failed to consider.
Yeah.
I always ask people that I work with to look for the pertinent negative, and I use AI to help me to do that as well. It's not always
Yeah.
effective at doing that, and I'm not always effective at doing that, but I think it helps me improve my odds of realizing the things that I didn't know I didn't know.
Yeah.
And so that's another useful use case in my opinion.
Yeah. That's that's amazing. Is if you could offload one operational or design step in your process without losing quality, what would that be? Or, if there is any a step that you would want to offload.
I'm not so sure about that right now.
Yeah.
I mean, that's partly because I love operations, and so
Yeah.
I'm always thinking about how to make the
Yeah.
tool
Yeah.
more efficient. I suppose, you know, I do, and obviously this is just getting into science fiction, but the day that comes when I can just think my email responses rather than typing them out.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the thing that I find. That's the thing that
Yeah.
I find a little bit painful. Is okay. I would rather just hop on the phone. Somehow it's come to pass, despite being a millennial. I'm not a texter. I don't particularly like emailing. I'll do it. I prefer to hop on the phones. I know that
Yeah.
there's dictation and things like that, but it's not quite what I'm
It's not it's not quite the same.
once I can think into a computer, that would be fabulous. Or I mean, that's
Yeah.
not, hopefully that's not
Connect the brain to, yeah.
a little scary and hopefully not happening anytime soon. And I will not be
Yeah.
volunteering for that experiment, but that would be nice.
Right.
But and then the other thing that I think about quite a bit is, and this is not something I want to offload. It is something that I want us to really, really be thinking about across all industries. Is how do we carefully consider trust, safety, privacy, consumer well-being, and the implementation
Yes.
of our tools? Because I found, especially over the last year or so, that there are all of these new tools emerging, and then you find that they actually have not really considered consumer safety. For example, I will not be naming any names, but I know that there is a company that recently pushed out a map feature to go with their photo sharing app, and I thought, well, that's dangerous.
Yeah.
Probably should have thought about that before
Right.
implementing, and we probably should not have auto opted people into that because we don't want
Yeah, definitely.
to.
Definitely.
So if perhaps as AI agents are coming along and contextualize artificial intelligence is being built into like co-pilots and things like that, maybe we can really build stronger ethical considerations
Yeah.
into technology, so that even if our common sense somehow eludes us, perhaps the technology can help remind us of our consciences.
Yeah. Amazing. What does the next 12 months look like for EM-KOS? Or yeah, I guess the next year. What are your main goals and priorities? What does success look like for you? And what are, I guess, the biggest challenges and roadblocks, I guess, holding you back from reaching those?
We are seeking increasingly ambitious projects, working on, I mean, every customer that we work with means a great deal to us, and we do work with increasingly larger organizations, although we like the sweet spot of small to mid-sized businesses. I'm a big believer in small business. Small business, at least in North America, is the largest segment, and there's a lot of potential there. And we love seeing the changes that we make. And so helping more small businesses to be extremely effective, more profitable, and generally,
Yeah.
here as businesses is the perpetual goal. But
Yeah.
we're still learning as we go, and 12 months from now, I won't say that I want this all to feel easy breezy, because ideally everything that we're learning now, growing pains, procedural challenges, things like that, I hope that all of that will be behind us and we'll be on to new challenges and increasingly ambitious projects.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, Evan, it's been an amazing conversation. Learned a lot. I think we align on a lot of the same ideals on AI and strategy. So it was a really fun conversation to have. Is there anything else while we're on that you'd love to touch on or plug?
I just want to thank you for your time and thinking about artificial intelligence with me today. I think that this is one of the most important, these are some of the most important conversations that we can be having, particularly as it relates to ethics and unlocking human potential. I just want to emphasize that artificial intelligence should not replace humans necessarily, it should change work for the better.
Could not agree more. I could not agree more. Well, thank you so much, Evan. Thank you all for listening. This has been the 1760 sessions. Evan McFalls with EM-KOS Consulting. Yeah, so we'll see you on for the next one. Thank you, guys.
Fantastic. Thanks, Matt.